15th, and I'm going to call the select board meeting to order. First item is approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any changes to the agenda?
Nope.
Hearing none, all in favor of approving the agenda as drafted, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Next is approval of the consent agenda.
I move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Anything on the consent agenda? Anything about the minutes or any? Hearing none. All in favor of approving the consent agenda as drafted, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Citizen comments. Is there anyone here for something? Yes.
Just a quickie there. Okay.
Thank you, I feel much better.
Yes, much better.
I didn't want anybody to confuse me with being Andy Hooper.
Yes.
I have a reputation to maintain.
Hello, friends. I just wanted to thank the select board and staff for the very, very hard work. Very hard work that you're doing. And I know this time of budget configuration is really hard, and it's hard for citizens to grapple with it too. And we know that we're about to enter a period where there's so much stress with uncertainty around health insurance, so there's a lot of concern, of course, on the minds of our taxpayers and everybody, and you're considering that. And I know tonight's budget, you're looking at what you can painfully reduce, and I just want to thank you for that effort. It means a lot, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful for that. And I also wanted to let you know that those that don't pay taxes necessarily, but are in our midst, the unhoused or renters, that are on the edge, are really struggling too. And you heard from me before about how the faith communities have been trying to work with you to respond to that crisis. And we know that Charter House recently had a crisis where they couldn't admit as many overnight guests as they could, and it's been brutally cold. So I'm just pleased to tell you that there's been such a wonderful, rapid response to helping them get back online so that they can be able to take overnight guests again. And they're hopeful that they can do that beginning this week. So that's good. But even that, they can only really take 6 to 7 people overnight, and we just don't know what the need's going to be. So the reason I'm saying this to you is because people are grateful for the town public buildings being open, and they are listed, their hours are listed on the Looking for Resource brochure, especially on the front, so that it's not just about bathrooms, it's really where they can drop in to warm up. And we are grateful for staff just being considerate of that right now, especially right now, at our rec center, in our library, our public buildings, even here at the office, they need to warm up in our lobbies and use our bathrooms. So anything that you or staff can do to just continue to help with that is really good. And I can tell you that, the way the overnight works is people they can't check in before 7 p.m. So there's a gap, right? So most public buildings are closed between 5 and 7 p.m. So that's the gap. And then they have to be out of Charter House by 7 a.m. So there's another gap between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. before places are open, like the library. So we've been just trying to brainstorm on that and try to get the faith centers open, but if you could think about that too, and I'm just thinking about our library, because it's such an important place for people to drop in. So I just wanted to let you know that. It's definitely been wonderful to see the coordination that's happening right now. And I just wanted to give you that update. And I know that the Middlebury area homelessness task force will be meeting on Thursday, and we'll check in on more of that, but just wanted to give you that update.
Thanks, Laura.
Okay.
Thank you.
Brian, we do have one hand up
yes.
online. So I apologize if I mispronounce your name, but I believe Aleph, perhaps. I'm going to allow you to speak. You just need to unmute yourself. There you go.
Thank you for your time. I just wanted to speak on behalf of myself and many other taxpayers. Feel that it's unacceptable for entities to request more funds from the town of Middlebury right now. Local residents have experienced huge inflation in the tax burden, and we're facing significant increases for years to come. This is going to be the legacy of the select board overseeing these tax increases. This should go without saying, but we are talking not about the town's money, but taxpayers' money. These are tough decisions. I understand that. I respect everybody on the select board, everybody in the room, but now is the time to focus on easing the tax burden for the hardworking families in town. While these are certainly worthy entities, these four, they should be seeking private donations. Middlebury has many obligations that, in my opinion, are not adequately being met, specifically maintenance of our infrastructure and roads. I know our staff is doing the best they can with the funds available, but we need to be cutting these donations and putting them into our infrastructure. That's not to say that I don't, I personally donate a lot of money and I support all these entities in essence, but it's not the place of this local government to be funding these with taxpayer money. And I just want to say that, the select board, D1 select board, is very challenging. I understand that, and it's okay to decline these requests. Please show courage and respect the hardworking families in this town. You may personally want to support these entities. I actually do support some of these personally, but remember, this is not just about the people in front of you. It's about all of your constituents. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Al.
How do you pronounce your name? I'm sorry.
Sorry?
How do you pronounce your name?
It's Aleph with a
Aleph,
long
okay.
A.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else? Okay. Mark?
Just a quick one. Two residents have expressed interest in serving on our energy committee, and you met both of them at our last meeting. So tonight we're looking for the board to consider appointing them. It would bring our committee total to 9.
I move to approve Dan Murphy and Richard Wolfson to the Town of Middlebury's Energy Committee.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions? There are none. Can we get Andy back up in there?
Andy, if you could just unmute, we can get a thumbs up from you.
Sure. Gotcha.
There we go. Couldn't see you in that little box that far away. Hearing no questions, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Hi.
Aye. Aye. Okay, unanimous.
Those are 10 minutes.
And with that, earlier this year, we had talked about inviting Kevin Chu, the Vermont, to speak about the Vermont Futures Project and kind of help us with understanding. Certainly, it's one of the areas that we're struggling with. It's housing, and a big part of what they're working on. And Kevin, welcome to the Middlebury Select Board. Pleasure to have an opportunity to hear you talk about the Economic Action Plan.
Thank you very much for having me. Really appreciate it. I want to start off by echoing some of the sentiments already shared in sharing my gratitude for you all and being part of the Select Board and just giving back to the civic infrastructure that makes communities in Vermont so special. My name is Kevin Chu. I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont Futures Project. Since I'm meeting many of you for the first time, I'll say a little bit more about who I am before I dive into the Futures Project and the work to produce the Economic Action Plan. I grew up in Vermont. I want to grow old here too. And I feel lucky to call myself a Vermonter. My parents immigrated from Southeast China back in 1986. Ended up in Vermont of all places because I have an aunt that married an American and they happen to have a home in Shelburne at the time. That was the one social connection that my family had to this entire country. Could have ended up anywhere, ended up here. I'm very glad that happened because I was the beneficiary of so much goodwill and kindness, people going out of their way to make sure that my family, that I had opportunities to access education, to grow a career here, and my work is focused on how to pay that forward, how to make sure that opportunity continues to be part of Vermont's narrative, not only today, but moving forward into the future as well. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. I've got a few slides to share that will talk about the economic action plan and set the stage for a broader discussion on housing, population, and the economic impacts of demographics. So as I cue that up, I will also say after my presentation, I'm going to turn it over to a group of students from Middlebury College that I've been partnering with throughout the semester, who have researched the environmental benefits of creating new housing in a place like Middlebury where there are a lot of job opportunities. So the two presentations will be back-to-back and complementary. So the work of the Futures Project is geared towards answering this mission question. How can we use data to support the evolution of Vermont's economy towards a thriving future full of opportunity for all? There's that opportunity word again. So the way we've gone about answering this question is by developing this economic action plan. And I see many of you already have a copy. I have extras here for folks in the room who might want a copy. What does this mean towards affordability and abundance? I just also want to go on the record and say we published this in January of 2025, about a month and a half before the book Abundance came out. So I want to give a shout out to Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson for finding inspiration from our work. The economic action plan was developed not only through quantitative analysis, there's plenty of data in here, but it was also a process of engaging with Vermonters. I spoke with over 5,000 people over the course of about 2 years across all 14 counties to try to understand what are the challenges they face, what are the barriers that are holding them back, but more importantly, what are the hopes, dreams, and ambitions that they have for themselves, for their kids, for their families, for the next generation. This word cloud is just a quick summary of some of the key themes, the words and the phrases that I encountered most often. I don't think any of these words will come as a surprise. Affordability, housing, cost of living, workforce shortage. So when we hear these words, we hear these phrases, we often try to tackle the challenges one by one. And through the research, we try to separate what are symptoms versus what are root causes, right? There's that list of symptoms again. These are the headlines that we read. These are the difficult conversations that we have in our communities. But we have to be able to take a step back and also address root causes to create long-term sustainable change. So the economic plan was created on these pillars of people and places, specifically demographics and housing scarcity. So we'll dive into some of the data to take a look at what I mean by that. In terms of demographics, this chart shows Vermont's age distribution from the year 2000. And the hardest part about presenting this is admitting that the year 2000 was 25 years ago. It pains me to say that every time. But what you'll notice is that there were a lot of working age adults relative to the number of children and elderly. About 226,000 Vermonters between 25 and 49 in the year 2000. And only about 77,000 in the 65 plus cohort. So fast forward to today, and it's a very different picture. There are over 30,000 fewer in that 25 to 49 category, and the 65 plus population has nearly doubled. So what does this mean when we go from demographics to the implications for our state? It means a shrinking workforce, a shrinking tax base, it means fewer people paying into commercial health insurance. This is the driver of many of the affordability challenges that we face, right? And the needs of an aging population also increase. So one way to track that, economists take a look at a metric called dependency ratio, and you see that it's been going up and up. So that's the ratio of working age adults relative to the number of children and elderly. So when we start to intersect the demographic data with the labor market data, here's the picture that we get. What you see in this chart is age cohorts, total number of people in each. So that's the blue bar, and then superimposed on that is labor force for each age cohort. It's a very unbalanced chart, but I'll point out a few things. What you'll notice is most working age adults are participating in the labor force at a high rate, and the drop in overall labor force participation in recent years has been because of retirements. So how do we close our workforce gap? Well, we can pursue efficiency strategies. That's how do we do more with what we have? How do we get more people back into the workforce? But simultaneously, we also need expansion strategies. We have to increase the working age population as well. I like to think about this chart through a sports analogy, which is if we pretend for a sec that the workforce of Vermont is a college sports team. Team Vermont has a lot of seniors who will be graduating from the workforce soon, retiring, and we need to do a better job recruiting the next class of freshmen or transfer sophomores from other states. So beyond just saying we have a workforce shortage, we can actually quantify what that gap is. And this plan was built to try to close this gap, and on an annual basis, I just want to point out the main drivers here. Retirements account for about 17,150 in this workforce supply and demand chart. That means that's how many people annually are leaving the labor force. To contextualize that, we have 5,300 12th grade students in the entire state of Vermont. Right? Those two numbers don't balance out. We don't retain 100% of our high school grads. And even if we did, it wouldn't close the gap. When we add to that the college grads that we retain and the inbound migration that has happened, we find that we should be trying to add about 13,500 new people into the workforce each year. Yes, some of that can come from people who are already here who are not participating, but we have to do that and try to bring more people here. So that led to the development of this long-term ambitious target to grow Vermont's population size to 802,000 by 2035. I wanted to show you some of the math first because usually when people see this, they say, oh, you picked that just because of the area code. It's based on this workforce gap analysis. And when we project out to 2035, 2040, the numbers get in the 800,000 range. And 800,000 is big and scary in a Vermont context, but 802 has been pretty well received. It's a little more familiar and comfortable for some reason. I'll say even if we grow to that size, we can still operate under one area code, so no worries there. And a little bit of subliminal messaging, the picture on this slide in the background, that's from a day in Vermont's history when we actually had over 800,000 people in the state, and over 150,000 visitors for the solar eclipse. And we're still here. Vermont didn't break. So going from this to, okay, practically, how do we achieve such a goal? Housing is a big part of that equation. And back to the root causes. So housing scarcity, what does that look like? When we take a look at this data, we can see from an economic perspective, Vermont needs more people. The other part of the story we need to tell is more people need Vermont. And we saw some of that during the early phases of the pandemic, inbound migration, people seeking out Vermont. And there are a variety of factors why that demand for Vermont will continue, whether it's climate or values-based migration, or even the economic opportunities of innovative businesses that are starting and scaling here, or folks coming here for education, healthcare. If more people need Vermont, right, if demand continues to increase, we have to address the supply side of housing as well. Because when we don't, this is the result, the affordability challenge that Vermonters have been talking about. Price is an indicator that's signaling an imbalance between demand and supply. But inherently, demand for Vermont is actually a very good thing. People want to be here. People want to relocate here. that can work to our advantage. It's inherently a better position to be in than the opposite. If people kept moving away because no one wanted to be here, I would be a lot less optimistic about our future. So we have to step up to this challenge. And when we take a look at the housing data, new construction of housing over the decades, we're going in the wrong direction. Vermont has some of the oldest housing stock in the country. About a quarter of our housing was built before 1940. And then we used to build at a relatively healthy rate. You could see that in the 70s and 80s, but in recent decades, new housing construction has decelerated significantly to the point where less than 20% of Vermont's overall housing stock has been built in the last 20 years. Right, and our needs for housing are very different now than they were in the 1970s and 1980s. One of the questions I get often is, well, our population really hasn't been growing much, so why do we all of a sudden need so many more homes? And one could argue that maybe the population hasn't been growing because we haven't been building homes, but I want to zoom in on the intersection between housing and demographics. In 1970, the needs of the population were very different. Families were larger. Median household size was about 3.21. So I've simplified the math on this slide. There are 2 homes, 6 people, right? And when we take a look at what this picture looks like today, it's a very different scenario where median household size is down to 2.3. There are still 6 people on this slide. 2 of them just happened to move out of Vermont because they were the kids that grew up here but couldn't find housing because we didn't build anymore. And you see that there may be some empty bedrooms in larger homes that are occupied by fewer people. So for the same population size, the housing needs have increased. It's a predictable dynamic with an aging population. But it also means there's some untapped potential. When we take a look at depopulation, right, knowing that many towns around the state have fewer people today than they used to have, we see a pretty powerful story. So all the areas that are blue and green on this map have fewer people today than they had at one point in the past. I call that latent capacity. So if you were to add all that up and just play out a thought experiment, say, what if we restored every town back to its historical peak? Doing that alone would add over 70,000 people to the state of Vermont. You see, I've broken it out there by county, so for Addison County, it'd be over 4,000. But the only way we can tap back into some of that hidden potential, that latent capacity, is with new housing stock to bring mobility back to the market, to free up some of those larger homes that are currently being occupied by folks who may not need those homes anymore. So how are we doing in terms of allowing housing? This is housing permits over the decades, and the general trend is downward. There's some fluctuations that follow macroeconomic cycles. Recessions usually correlates with slowdowns in home building. But you see, we permit fewer homes today than we did in the 90s, the 80s. And I just want to restate that word with a slightly different pronunciation. Permit. That's how many we allow. That's how many we give permission to be built. And when we talk about the housing crisis that many members of our community are experiencing, we need to act with a little bit more urgency to allow more homes to be built. One of the phrases I hear all over Vermont and even nationally is housing is a human right. So if housing is a human right, then it should be right to build housing. But in many instances, the default answer that developers are encountered with is no. And it's a difficult, laborious process to get to a yes answer, if it ever happens. So we'll take a step back and just wrap up with a decision-making framework on what it means to move towards affordability and abundance. This Venn diagram, I tried to simplify it by leaving the numbers out and just showing where we are conceptually and what are our options as a state moving forward. Right now, Vermont is at the intersection of the blue and the green circles. We try to take care of our neighbors and provide ample services and programs, And we're doing so with low population density, a small tax base, a shrinking tax base. And the result is high cost of living. It's the affordability challenge that we all hear about. When we take a look at how to lower that cost of living, we can do so with some difficult decisions about what to potentially leave out of a budget or what services may need to be consolidated or even cut. Those are difficult conversations that are happening all over the state. And that may lead to some short-term savings, but that option also has dire long-term consequences in making it harder to attract the next generation of people who may want to join our community. The other option is an abundance pathway. That's accelerating housing. It's growing the population. It's recognizing that, yes, maybe we need a little bit more density, but that's okay. And when we take a look at what I mean by high cost of living, here's some data showing where Vermont ranks in terms of state tax collections per capita. We're that green column there. The other New England states are highlighted in blue. Most of the New England states are in the top half. New Hampshire is the outlier there. But just so that we have the broader context of how Vermont compares to other states around the country. When I ask Vermonters, are you supportive of growing Vermont's population size to strengthen its workforce? Most people say yes. And we've actually seen an increase in the number of people saying yes over the past few years. What about housing? Are you supportive of creating new housing to increase the population in Vermont? What about in your town? What about in your neighborhood? And we see a predictable dynamic where the closer to home it gets, the more uncertainty and opposition. But I think the takeaway from this is actually at every scale, there are more people that say yes than no. And not all those people might be in the room tonight, but I think it's important that we look to this data to understand the sentiment of our neighbors, of Vermonters, more broadly, because not everyone has the means or the privilege to participate in this discussion here tonight. But I want to make sure that their voice is heard too, and is represented through the data that I'm sharing with you today. So to wrap things up, the long-term target of the Futures Project will help to address some of the demographic pressures that are impacting affordability, and it would help to get Vermont back on track. When we take a look at historical growth up until the last 2 decades, we were on a trajectory to get to 802 over the next 10 years. If Vermont had continued growing at the same rate it was in the 80s and 90s, we'd have well over 700,000 people today. But we've plateaued. We're living through unprecedented times. We're living through the anomaly, the outlier in the data. And to get to 802, yes, it'd mean adding 155,000 people to Vermont, but when you translate that to an annual goal, that's 2% growth per year. 2%, right? Now take that number and apply it to a local context. If you live in a town of 1,000 people, that's how do you welcome 20 new residents next year? That's maybe 7 or 8 new homes based on median household size. So for a town like Middlebury, which is closer to 9,000-10,000, right? It's order of magnitude higher, so 200. That would take maybe 100 homes. It's much more palatable. It's much more realistic when you start to take that big number and slice and dice it down to a local context. So I'll end by saying 2% for Vermont, drink your milk, we're gonna be okay. And we'll get back to questions, but I wanna turn it over now to our students to share how housing is also an environmental solution for Middlebury. Thank you.
Kevin, could you tell me which names are part of the group and I'll pronounce them?
Yes, it's Lilia, Tessa, and Ariel.
All right, can everybody hear us all right?
Yes. Yeah.
Great. All right, well, thank you so much for having us. My name is Lilia.
I'm Ariel. And I'm Tessa.
And as Kevin briefly introduced, we are a group of senior environmental studies students from the college who had the privilege of working with Kevin and the Futures Project this semester in our senior capstone course, which is a project-based alternative to a thesis in environmental studies. So some previous cohorts of environmental studies students from the same course last spring and the spring of 2024 partnered with Kevin to establish the social and environmental context necessary to answer the question of who is Vermont for. Our work this semester builds on this question and all of the work that Kevin just presented and seeks more specifically to determine where we can say yes to smart growth in Vermont. Are our slides showing?
No, but you can, if you share your screen at the bottom. Or Kevin, if you have them.
I don't.
Okay.
Yeah, do one of you guys have the slides?
Does she have permission to share it?
Yep.
Yeah.
10 minutes.
Here, let me share it.
There we go.
There you go.
All right, we got it.
Thanks, Tessa.
There we go.
Perfect. Okay, we can go to the next one. So our project this semester started with some research and interrogation of what is smart growth. Smart growth is a framework for sustainable development that emphasizes the co-location of jobs and homes through concentrated land use and resource allocation. So why is Middlebury a great candidate for smart growth? As a local economic hub and a net importer of labor, the town of Middlebury employs nearly 4.5 times the number of workers that it exports, as you can see from this visual of inflow and outflow commuters. At the same time, Middlebury lacks the housing necessary to position these people more conveniently and therefore sustainably to their jobs, as Kevin explained. This has resulted in a jobs to homes ratio that is nearly double the ideal, which translates to an overwhelming majority of Middlebury commuters that are traveling to and from work in single occupancy vehicles, which of course translates to high emissions. So as we've grappled with this intersection of variables throughout the semester, our central research question has emerged, which is how can we quantify the environmental and economic impacts of smart growth, particularly through housing and commuting. So in situating this question within the larger context, we framed our analysis around the goals adopted by the town from the Climate Economy Action Center of Addison County. This plan addressed transportation as the second highest impact sector in Addison County, responsible for 27% of our emissions, as you can see from the visual. We aligned our own emissions reductions goals and process with the first two strategies listed on screen, reducing both gasoline consumption and vehicle miles traveled by 25% by the year 2030.
So to quantify the environmental impact of transportation, we established the formula you can see here that allowed us to calculate for baseline greenhouse gas emissions by Middlebury commuters for the year of 2030. The equation factors in most cars' average carbon emissions per mile and the vehicle miles traveled, or total distance traveled, of inflow workers from their hometowns to Middlebury, which we predicted for with the model displayed in the graph. And the estimated carbon emissions calculated this way is approximately 40,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide for the year of 2030. We then compared this number from our baseline scenario to two other scenarios, one of concentrated growth and unbalanced land use, and where land is inefficiently used mostly for single-family homes, and the other being concentrated growth and balanced land use, also known as our smart growth scenario, which emphasizes dense housing developments. The baseline business as usual scenario assumes that current trends in housing development and commuter emissions are followed and that there is limited co-locations of jobs and homes. However, our concentrated growth scenario and unbalanced land use scenario would achieve a 25% reduction in emissions by increasing the number of houses to be built in Middlebury, although they would match inflow worker demographic preferences for housing type by age and income. In a smart growth scenario, on the other hand, housing developments would target commuters who are more likely to live in dense housing, which demographically correlates with workers who travel greater distances. As we can see in this table, the business as usual and concentrated growth and unbalanced land use scenarios have greater numbers of single-family homes being built, whereas the smart growth scenario has a greater number of multifamily homes, which reduces the amount of single-family homes or duplexes necessary to reach our climate goals. However, it's important to note that the quantity of workers with preferences for multifamily housing in these scenarios is finite. We could reduce the number of single-family homes even further by convincing more people to live in multifamily homes. If 75% of workers were to live in multifamily housing, for example, our numbers would look like this. So overall, the unbalanced land use scenario would reduce carbon emissions by around 10,000 metric tons yearly, and the smart growth scenario would reduce 51 more metric tons, which is equivalent to the annual energy use of 1,353 homes.
So the next part of our analysis focused on matching the statistical regressions to the local land use conditions within Middlebury. And we started by focusing on the state's housing goals that are defined by the Act 250 exemptions that you can see on this map to the left, with the darker representing the neighborhood development area and the lighter representing priority housing projects within a half-mile buffer. And in the right map, we decided to zoom into specific parcels within the town that are within the state-defined regions and looked at the amount of underdevelopment, which is defined here as the amount of land that is not yet developed, but has the potential to be developed. The darker parcels are areas with more potential and vice versa, lighter have less potential. And these parcels are within existing sewer and water infrastructure, so they would be less expensive to build on and would allow for the kind of smart growth that we're looking for. And then for each of these previously mentioned scenarios, we sort of focused on different regions within the town that we don't have time to cover now, but are in our full report that will be distributed to Kevin. And I just want to mention that this was simply like a first step towards evaluating different areas for potential new housing, not necessarily a recommendation of exactly where to build, but it does show that we have a lot of capacity, even though we are only looking at one kind of land use, and of course there are other kinds of land uses that need to be acknowledged as well.
Great, so with that, we'd like to conclude with another guiding philosophy from Kevin that has really helped to shape our work throughout the semester, which is that Vermont needs more people and more people need Vermont, as you saw through his presentation right before this. We are hopeful, as Tessa said, that by starting to embrace and introduce a smart growth approach, Middlebury can be a leader for the rest of the state in addressing the root causes that Kevin outlined, as well as the symptoms such as affordability, workforce challenges, and of course the climate crisis. Thank you so much for your time, and yeah, we really appreciate this opportunity.
Great,
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Hopefully you'll stay on because I'm sure we have some questions here. I'll open the floor for some questions.
You're clearly much smarter than I am at it. No NIL deals for academics.
Kevin, I'm thrilled that we finally got you and your students in here. I'm sorry it took so long and came after they'd returned home for the holidays and in the middle of our budget season, which is more fraught than usual this year. But it's fantastic to have you here, and I love your vision for Vermont. I love the idea that everyone who wants to be a Vermonter should be able to be a Vermonter. Anyone who wants to make this place better should be welcomed here, and we should do our best to make sure they've got a place that they can live a happy and healthy life in our great state. And from our seats on the select board, we can say a lot, but it's hard to know what we can do to move a dial. Is it a job of evangelizing and suggesting that a community is stronger when it's got more people? Or is it doing legal things in our zoning and in the way that we try to select candidates for planning and DRB?
Thanks, Andy. I do believe it's a mix of that. Certainly in your positions of leadership within a community, helping to set a vision really does make a difference when it comes to how processes play out, how policy is shaped. I am a firm believer that policies and process emerge from the underlying attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors of a community. So you get to help set that example. What was the word you used? Evangelize? Please do. At the same time, I do think there's an opportunity through that leadership lens to critically reflect on what are the levers that you do have influence over that could make a difference. One way that I've talked about this work across the state is to examine what are the defaults that emerge in public processes, in your rules. I mentioned earlier, if housing's a human right, then it should be right to build housing, but oftentimes the default answer is no. And when we take a look at behavioral economics research, if we can align the default with the desired outcome, you get much better long-term outcomes at much lower friction. One of the classic studies is on saving for retirement. If an employee elects to, or if they must elect to opt in to defer some of their wages to save for retirement, sometimes they just don't ever end up doing that. But for employees who are automatically enrolled in a retirement savings program, the long-term financial outcomes are often much better, because very rarely do they take the time and go through the bureaucratic process to file the paperwork and ask for permission to opt out of that retirement savings program. We could apply similar concepts to how we approach housing or infrastructure. So it's adopting a growth mindset and orientation and making it easier, or perhaps making it the default, to say yes. And again, this can be guided by data. What is the goal? What is the target? What's the rate of growth? We can make adjustments along the way. I actually think that Vermont was a prime example during the pandemic of allowing data to help lead public decision-making processes. Remember the analogy of opening or closing the spigot, right? So we adapted as conditions changed. And right now, as we've heard, many people will use the phrase housing crisis. So let's make sure we turn the dials as needed to respond appropriately to that crisis with urgency.
Okay.
I should explain for you, you don't know me, but I'm Fred Dunnington. I was the town planner in Middlebury for 32 years, between 1981 and 2013. Affordable housing is not or housing need is not a new thing. We formed committees in this on my first arrival here. And the challenge is that the town does not regulate the economy. And you can zone things and say, here's the density you can build to, but if people want to move to Vermont and to live in the country, you can't make them live in the city. You can't make them live in apartments, all right? And developers find it more profitable to build to higher end, more expensive. So just going back before my time here, the rise in median house prices and the rise in median incomes was spreading drastically, and it's been spreading for 50 years. We're fighting economic gravity at this point, and despite our best efforts to make the zoning accommodate more housing, and we did build out studies showing we had capacity for thousands more, you can't make people sell their land. So we have people who are holding property, that could be developed because it's an investment. We have people coming to live here. It's an attractive place to live. They buy an extra home here. Across the street from me, there was a person who bought a home there, doubled its value with an improvement, even put an Airbnb unit in it. It was vacant practically the entire time for 3 years until they just sold it. That's just a personal anecdote. In my 32 years here, we never denied a housing development. Not one. Appeals were not the problem on zoning. We did have an Act 250 appeal of an Eastview elderly housing project that we supported the developer with, and that ultimately got built. In the late 80s, we enacted an inclusionary zoning, which was a fairly advanced thing to require developers to build a portion of their housing PHFA eligible for first-time home buyers. We didn't have a lot of takers on that, but the only appeal we've ever had in our zoning was an appeal by the developer, the South Ridge project, to get out of that requirement that was in that approval. And the select board at that time settled to waive that requirement. The exasperation that I feel when, despite the best efforts, if even the college's most recent fantastic contribution to the Stonecrop project, do you know what the zoning density, the maximum density allowable on that site was?
What was it?
It's well over double what the developer was able to do, and that came with an enormous public subsidy and contribution by the college holding the land and all. The town doesn't have the capacity in its grand list. We are growing at a paltry 1.5% a year in our grand list. We're not keeping up with the cost of growth, let alone inflation. So how can we finance the infrastructure? Because housing, building materials are more expensive now. Price of land is more expensive. Contractors are more scarce. We can't, as a town, make that stuff happen. And to the chagrin of some people, last week we approved a very intensive housing project. We'll see how that works out. But just yesterday in the New York Times, there was an article, "No Quick Fix for a Housing Crisis," and it cites the 2023 study, more recent, by the Urban Institute, which found no statistically verifiable evidence that more lower-cost housing became available after 9 years of monitoring the deregulation effects, allowing increased density. It's like Reagan would have said, this is voodoo economics, it's voodoo, housing economics, to just assume that changing regulations will make people want to suddenly build in a much more urban way than they want to. Some of the areas that you showed on your map as being priority areas, that are underbuilt. Some of the biggest beige areas on that map are the college and the industrial park. Those are not really available for single-family homes or even apartments. In the older neighborhoods like Butt Off Acres, Gorham Lane, those were established with deed covenants, which are private contractual arrangements. The town cannot supersede those. The legislature could say, after a certain number of years, it's against public policy, just like some of the old covenants had terrible prejudice in them, and say that those can be re-subdivided and people can do infill. And two adjoining lot owners can create a lot between them where the water and sewer already exists. And that's a lot easier than building new development with infrastructure because it's all there on the street already. And not everybody's going to want to do that.
Fred?
But I'm sorry.
A lot of good info. That's really better for us having a
we should
working
have
session
an
of
entire
our own.
session separate. But not
We've
when we're
invited
fighting
guests
budget.
here, and I think the board would like to hear their thoughts on this. Brian?
Yeah, you mentioned it's a mix of everything that, including zoning and people wanting to move here, people not wanting to move out of the state, or developers willing to develop housing here, right? How do you, the challenge I see that the cost of construction is so high, there's no incentive for them to come and build housing. If they don't make enough money, why would they build something? Do you hear that often from this challenge, or if that is a challenge, how do we address that?
Yeah, certainly. I think that developers, rightfully so, are asking what's going to pencil out. What are the types of projects where there can be a profit margin, and often it's going to be the projects that are either subsidized or the very high end where the customer is less price sensitive, right? And that leaves a big gap in between. This economic action plan tries to tackle what can feel like an overwhelming challenge, building new housing, and break it into some of the component parts. So we did so through the framework of 5 L's: land, labor, lumber, lending, and laws. And some of those factors are certainly outside of our direct control. Federal interest rates, we don't set those in Vermont. It is a factor. We have to be able to set that aside and turn our attention to what are the things that we can affect. Even if it's only a small 1 or 2% piece of the entire puzzle, we should still take a look at it, right? Because federal interest rates, for example, every state has to deal with that. I mentioned the book Abundance earlier, and in it there's a case study that examines the cost of building housing in California versus Texas. What they found was that it cost almost 4 times as much to build 1 unit of affordable housing in the state of California compared to Texas. Same square footage, same materials, right? As you can overlap, what are the things that are the same and what are the things that are different, and use that as a starting point of asking, okay, what are some ideas that we might want to try from places that are having more success building housing at an affordable price and helping to lower the cost of living for community members. That's not to say that we have to pick one of those models, right? There's a big spectrum in between California and Texas. But the reality is Vermont's probably a little bit closer to the California side of that spectrum. There are other examples around the country of places that have had more success in developing more homes, and in places where supply is starting to meet up with demand, we're seeing prices start to flatten out, and in some cases even decrease. I often use the analogy that the housing market right now is kind of like a game of musical chairs, and when the music stops, if there aren't enough chairs, then someone's left standing. I would love to see us get to a place where housing in Vermont is kind of a boring game of musical chairs, like if we played here in this room today. There are more chairs than people. So if we don't like the one we're in, we can get up, trade with someone else, try out another one, but that's not where we're at today.
I just a couple of quick comments. In talking to Farhad, most of the development in 20 years I've seen here is people building individual homes. That's not an affordable home. Nobody comes in and say, I'm going to build an affordable home here. And I've moved around a lot, and all those places were developers building large developments. We've got Stonecrop going here. It's our first one. It's probably been subsidized so much that you're not going to find another developer who's going to be able to do that in here for years. So building, it's ludicrous to think that we're going to be able to think by building one home at a time, we're going to be able to meet your goals. Now, obviously, we've already talked about the cost of building. Another thing, the graph you showed that we're the second highest taxable state, and I know it's painful for me and it's painful for us right now, the discussions we're going to have tonight. Can you track people to the state saying come to the second most expensive state to live in with and pay the taxes? I have 2 sons that are approaching military retirement. They love Vermont. They're not going to move to Vermont for the 2 reasons. The taxes are too high, and the other thing is, and by the way, this book is outstanding. It's just incredible. It addresses the new legislation the state made for military retirement pay, which is a joke. It's a joke. Hardly any of us, I don't qualify for it. I'm a retired military. Brian probably doesn't qualify for that. And my son's moving here wouldn't require for that $10,000 forgiveness. When there's 35 states that they pay no taxes on any of their retirement. So it's things like that that's just a huge barrier. The aspiration is great. I really enjoy this. There's incredible ideas there. It's just going to be hard to convince people to come here. So
No, I appreciate your comments there, and I agree it's going to be hard. I don't want to sugarcoat that, right? Hitting some of these targets is ambitious. It is. And there's no silver bullet. There's no one idea that's going to solve everything. We have to be willing to try a lot of things and also be willing to accept that some of them may not be as effective or even fail. But we have to have a agreed upon collective direction that we want to go. I go back to that Venn diagram. Where do we want to be on that Venn diagram? We can't be in the middle.
Megan.
Yeah, can you give any examples of communities or towns in Vermont that are doing a really good job with this, that you see as like, that we could watch and study and mimic?
Sure, yeah, so I grew up in Burlington, and right next to Burlington is the city of Winooski, which has transformed immensely over the past couple of decades. And in part of their downtown, they've implemented form-based code. And essentially, the community came together and decided on the types of development that they want to see based on how it'll look, the aesthetics of it, with a little bit more leniency on how it's used. But that gave a bit of certainty and predictability to the process of how proposals would be assessed. They also leveraged TIF, tax increment financing, to enable some of that to happen. And with recent changes or additions like CHIP, the Community Housing Improvement Program, Infrastructure Improvement Program, there are new tools that allow for smaller scale project-based strategies similar to TIF, because TIF can be overwhelming, it can be burdensome administratively, but now there are new options available. So I'm hopeful that these are signals of progress and momentum. That alone, CHIP alone isn't enough, Act 181 isn't enough, but it's a step, again, in the right direction, and Act 250 has been in place for 55 years now, right? And now we're starting to see a little bit of change. We have 55 years worth of data to understand the impact regardless of original intent.
Act 250 didn't stop any of the big housing developments we had in the 50s and 60s, 60s and 70s here. It's not that much of a barrier.
No, but it is one of the factors, right? And you layer on top multiple things, and the accretion of policy over time means that new policy that's created will impact how older policy affects the whole. So we have to not only assess them in isolation, but how do the different layers interact with each other, both at the local level and state level.
Kevin, have you testified during the Act 250 review and some of the changes, and what is your opinion of some of the changes that have been made to the Act 250 last year, I guess?
Yeah. I wasn't around in 1970 to know for sure what the original intent was, but the stories I've been told is that it was put in place to protect Vermont's natural resources and to make sure that we're doing development in a responsible way. It's part of why I've worked with this incredibly talented group of students to assess how we're doing from an environmental perspective. Is Act 250 serving us in the way that we thought it did or would, or are there different models that we could explore moving forward? Some of the original parameters of Act 250, 10-5-5 rule, I don't know if y'all are familiar with that, but essentially you can build more than 10 units of housing in a 5-mile radius within a 5-year time period. So what did that promote? Maybe unintentionally, it promoted sprawl. Developers would propose projects of 9 units. They'd wait 6 years or maybe build things 7 miles apart. So again, we have enough data now to understand impact versus intent, and there may be models like smart growth where we can quantify both the economic and environmental benefits. So it's an opportunity for Vermont to not only reassess what we're doing, but I will also be releasing some new research in the coming month, a competitiveness dashboard that examines a range of metrics and assesses where Vermont ranks relative to other states. Similar to that tax assessment that you saw, we'll take a look at a variety of other indicators so that we have clarity on where we are, establish where we might want to go, and then we can take a look at those rankings to start to examine what are the states that are ahead of us doing that perhaps we can adapt into a Vermont context.
You said the 10.55, the absurdity of that 10th house that all of a sudden has to fall under Act 250 and it's treated for its life differently than the other 9 houses. And as an Act 250 commissioner, I deal with that, where they have controls on this one house that's maybe in a development that's different than every other one. And oftentimes local zoning doesn't even notice it. We don't have the capabilities to watch over that. When it comes up is when you have change of ownership and the attorneys find out that it's deed restricted, it's Act 250, and you have to go back and do review of every project that they've done. It takes up a lot of time.
Time and money.
You know, I would disagree with you, Fred, that it hasn't been an impediment. I feel that there are some changes that could be helpful. On our latest project, how does your team look at that and the stone crop, and would that be in the smart growth?
Yeah, I'll turn to the students because they actually did address stone crop in their full report. And Lilia, Tessa, Ariel, do any of you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, so the numbers that are shown in the presentation do actually include stone crop. And we also calculated without stone crop as well. And without stone crop, it would be an additional 250 something more housing units that would need to be built.
So it is included in the smart growth analysis, yes.
Okay.
Can I have one more question?
Well, Andy had a question first, and I'll give
Yeah,
it to you.
since we have these 3 graduating seniors available for a couple minutes, I was just curious if they had any ideas about how we can shape our communities and our state to encourage the people who come here for college to stay around.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good question, and I think something that is on all of our minds. And I mean, I think we didn't get to sort of fully think about this part of that problem. I think part of what we were, you know, if we had more time, Middlebury was, you know, our case study because it was a net importer of workers. I think we were going to plan on doing another case study that was a net exporter of workers, and kind of the focus of that was like building out like sort of towns, economic centers, and making, you know, thrivable communities that students would want to stick around for. You know, part of that's like, yeah, the jobs and the social aspect. But I think, I don't know, it sort of speaks to like the fact that, you know, we evaluated in Middlebury what smart growth would look like. It's, you know, would apply in different contexts in a different way. But yeah, I think, you know, it's a complicated thing. But I know that a lot of students do want to stay in Vermont and do love it. And I hope that some of these things that we talk about can address that too.
That's great, Tessa. I'll just tag on that to say, like, definitely a dominant rhetoric at the college is like, oh, what type of student comes to Middlebury? It's someone who loves the outdoors, loves outdoor recreation, that kind of thing. And I think that could maybe be extrapolated to the town or statewide level of needing to diversify the rhetoric of like, who is Middlebury for, who is Vermont for, and as a way of attracting from the rhetorical standpoint, and then, as Tessa mentioned, like from an actual economic standpoint and building out opportunities standpoint, trying to attract just a more diverse range of people to make everyone feel like they can pursue if it's outdoor recreation, if it's whatever like their interests are, they can pursue that from within Vermont.
Love their thoughts.
Got a good group there. Okay.
You make it look good.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if, even if we don't take into account the taxes and the developer's cost of construction and everything, is accessibility to services a factor why people don't want to live in a community where access to shopping, dining experiences, or transportation? How do we solve that? Without that, why would somebody want to come live in Middlebury where they can't buy a pair of shoes if they want to, right? So that I think is a very important thing, that we need to have a commercial development besides the housing, I think.
That's exactly right. It's addressed in the economic action plan, how economic development writ large and addressing the business climate in Vermont will be part of the long-term solution to give people more reason to say yes to Vermont. Interestingly, the inbound migration over the past few years to the state of Vermont, it was pretty well distributed into rural areas. I think some of that was enabled by remote work being much more prevalent, especially during the early stages of the pandemic. We're seeing some return to office movements across the country right now, to be determined what the equilibrium is on remote work and hybrid as a whole. I think it'll be a while before we get there. But the data show that there are still almost 2 times as many people working remotely in the country now than pre-COVID. So is that something that rural communities might be able to lean into as a strength to recruit folks who actually might want to seek out that slower pace of life, to try something different than a dense urban area? When we take a look at the inbound migration data, another really inspiring story in that data is that it's a lot of younger people. Inbound migration has mostly been folks between the ages of 25 to 44. And again, more people need Vermont. That's a signal from that data. The worrying thing to me is that it is exacerbating some of the affordability challenges because of the scarcity of housing. And what we find is that most of the inbound migration is from folks in higher income brackets, right? Because when we talk about affordability as a concept, it is a relative measure. So there are people who are moving to Vermont who find what is here more affordable than the places that they're coming from, right? So if we don't address the supply and make it more viable for a larger range of the socioeconomic spectrum to be able to say yes to Vermont, then we are going to be in this vicious cycle where only a select few can choose Vermont. And that's part of what we're trying to address by saying let's make sure there's enough seats around the room for everyone.
Thank you.
Kind of need to wrap up, but we would love to have another maybe opportunity to talk with you, Kevin. After we've talked as a board, I'm sure we'll have more insights that we would be looking for.
Yeah.
Since you're working across the spectrum and interviewing a lot of people, certainly we struggle. We've talked about a TIF. We really looked at that hard, and I'd seen St. Albans have a very good experience with it, and Newski, and in the end, the board didn't have the appetite to do it because of the challenge of overseeing it, and certainly the project-based TIF would have been much better for us. So a lot of different things going on, and we really appreciate you kind of opening our eyes on some of that. Some of your studies and your data is informative, and I'm sure it will help us as we talk about it. Housing is our #1 priority, has been for several years, and thanks to the college's partnership, I think we've got some momentum going there.
I really appreciate you hosting me for this conversation. I would just add a slight correction to the comment you made and say it's not my data, it's our data, and I'm glad we can have data-informed discussions at the community level. But most of this data is from the U.S. Census Bureau, Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Vermont Department of Labor. We all pay for that with our tax dollars. I'm just the translator and aggregator. So it's our data, and it's up to us to interpret it and act on it. Thank you.
Understood. And thank you to your three students. Really appreciate them joining us tonight.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Kevin and students.
This might be a good topic for our annual offsite.
Yeah.
Go through and see what we can do.
Okay.
Extra copies here for folks in the room. And, here's the one page. One pager if you don't want to read it.
Kevin, a lot of us like podcasts and books related to, leading a great community. So can you follow up with Mark with any kind of recommendations on good homework for us to divulge in related to abundance and housing abundance and smart growth?
Yeah, happy to.
Thank you.
250 years old. Something have cream cheese frosting.
Okay, yes, I do love that. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
This one has cream cheese frosting.
Oh, yeah, gotcha. Yeah,
I think your study is important and good. Sorry, but
You made it?
I did. And my kids.
career, trying to make it work. The table on $170,000
Cookies tonight. Wow. Those ones are cookies.
Yeah. How's the job role versus getting stolen?
Delays.
This is Allison.
That's very nice of you.
Very good.
Are we in an infrastructure meeting?
We are now. Snack time. Yes.
We left the room down.
Is that how they
You missed your chance.
They do it. Yeah. Snack time because Kathleen used to bring muffins always.
I went out to get my cookies, but I forgot.
To share makes everybody bring a snack. A treat to share. Yeah.
Hey, Andy,
Yes.
there's a paragraph in this book that I know Kevin put in for you. Foster collaboration and regional partnerships. Encourage municipalities to share administrative services, coordinate economic development, and pool resources to reduce redundancies and improve services delivery across rural areas.
Oh, music to my ears. Thanks, Dan.
Yep.
So I think one of the takeaways that I have from that is, and we've talked about it, is housing's our priority. And there's a number of areas that they've said, would look good. Is we really need to make sure we're clear as a board where our next two to three projects are. And that we're clear with developers. If we want to attract developers, we want to have the ability that we don't spend 2 or 3 years trying to figure out where that is, because it takes a couple of years to get that development underway, the permitting and all the planning and the financing. And so we really need to, and unfortunately, I won't be here, but I would encourage the board as a priority is the discussion of what's that where's our next site? And we've talked a little bit about it, and we have a couple potential sites, but there's, you know, it needs to be very clear that we support these 2 or 3 places. And we've done a lot of planning for several of those places previously, so. And I know there's developers that are interested. So,
My comments still seem negative. I have worked on this a long time, still believe passionately in the need to work on things. I disagreed with Jen's repeal of inclusionary zoning, but I didn't stand up publicly about it at the time. I think if the town really wanted to do this, it could identify not just 1 or 2 of the primary places you think the buyer and the seller will come to agreement on, but identify all of them. Identify ways that they're going to be the infill. See what we can do to move some of those things that are being held just as an investment. You'd think the burden of property taxes would drive it to it. It hasn't.
Well,
what can we do to really move things into the marketplace?
this is the, you know, knock on wood. Here's the freaking test question: is that they want to help us.
Yeah.
We need to say where we want it.
Exactly.
So, let's go on to the budget here. And what's that?
We
have something else?
Yes.
No, that's it.
No. Oh, local agencies. Yeah,
Yes.
but it's under the budget.
Yes.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So we every year we have 4 agencies present to us, and we have prioritized in recent years any with changes. And so, is Heidi online? Oh,
She
Heidi's
is,
online.
so if you're
So we'll invite Heidi Lacey from the Charter House Coalition to
Alrighty, Heidi,
presentation.
There we go. Hello, Heidi.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I apologize I can't be there with you in person. I never mind that, and although this is the first time I've come before you in this fashion, because we have, as Brian said, we've asked for an increase in funding this year for your consideration, so I'm going to dive in. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Heidi Lacey, and I'm the Executive Director of Charter House, which is the low barrier homeless shelter located at the top of the green in Middlebury. And we serve 26 homeless individuals every night of the year. Since I joined Charter House in 2020, the annual ask of the town has been $6,500. And I have not asked for an increase in funding until this year, and I would like to just provide to you with a quick bullet point list of the reason I'm asking for an additional $1,500 this year for a total ask of $8,000. Since 2020, Charter House has not required our guests to leave the shelter during the day. And I'm told through various agencies and partners that this has reduced the need for emergency services, as well as lessened the loitering experienced by downtown businesses. In 2023, staff and I were asked by the town of Middlebury and Middlebury Police Department to reactivate the homelessness task force, which up until recently I facilitated through a monthly meeting for service providers and community members to work together on concerns related to homelessness within the town, as well as throughout Addison County. In 2024, Charter House partnered with several nonprofit service providers to create and conduct street outreach. We do this work continuously 2 to 3 times per week, all year long. And our primary focus has been in Middlebury, but we have also traveled throughout Addison County as needed to connect with people who are living outside. In the fall of 2024, Charterhouse was part of a group of service providers that assisted with the infamous encampment behind the Ilsley Public Library. Our staff made almost daily contact with the group to offer support and referrals for safer housing, and by the time November rolled around, we had successfully housed all but one. In early 2025, Charterhouse was instrumental in collaborating between social service organizations and the town to draft the encampment policy, which was adopted also in the spring of 2025. Charterhouse signed on that memorandum of understanding with the town of Middlebury, and we are the first point of contact between the town and or the Middlebury Police Department regarding any people reportedly sleeping outside on Middlebury town parcels. To date, we have worked through 8 reports and only had to give notice to vacate to 1 instance that I'm aware of. Charterhouse operates 24 hours a day, and we offer a night-by-night emergency shelter between the months of November and April to help those that would otherwise be sleeping outside in freezing temperatures. This temporary emergency shelter has seen up to 10 individuals on any given night, and last night we documented serving 42 unduplicated individuals throughout that service. Additionally, Charterhouse keeps an inventory of outdoor gear that is distributed through outreach. We also collaborate with social service partners and are a hub for what we call go bags that provide essential services to people in need that cannot find shelter. We consistently work with law enforcement after hours to also provide these essential items. Our collaboration with the Middlebury Police Department has warranted either shelter in place here at the and or after hours emergency placement paid for by Charterhouse funds for those that the law enforcement officers have come into contact after 4 p.m. We have considered the town of Middlebury to be a substantial support in our efforts while we work through the crisis of homelessness. We're not coming to you telling you anything you don't know in terms of the housing crisis that all Vermonters are experiencing. I will say to you that me asking for $1,500 was me pushing myself. As the original community member, I believe his name was Elise maybe, mentioned, there are a lot of agencies that are vying for dollars, and I fully respect the fact that there are hard decisions that will be made tonight. But I do feel that based on the work that Charterhouse is doing, the number of people we are serving on an ongoing basis, and the fact that we are here 24 hours a day warrants a $1,500 increase in our request this year. Lastly, I will leave you with the knowledge that in the months between July 1st of 2024 and June 30th of 2025, Charterhouse successfully worked with 42 individuals to find them affordable, sustainable, suitable, safe housing. So while we are the front door, we also hope to be a door that's not just to temporary housing, but also helping to give people the permanencies that we all deserve within the community. So I'm going to end it with that. We're asking for $1,500 more for a lot of work. And I can tell you the go bags alone, we spend about $3,500 a year minimum on the inventories that we keep in place. So I hope you will share this widely. I hope many will watch this presentation, and if you have questions, we're around 24 hours a day, so give a call.
Thank you, Heidi.
You're welcome.
So, is Kevin Fox? He's here.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah.
Alrighty.
Please, Mark.
everybody doing tonight?
A different spot.
No, I don't see it here.
Yeah, so my name is Kevin Fox. I am the Executive Director for the Middlebury Area Land Trust. And first, I'd like to thank the Select Board for the town's continued support for our work. We greatly value the $10,000 allocation we received last year. And we appreciate the opportunity to explain why we're requesting an increase to $20,000 this year. As you already know, Malt's important role in Middlebury has expanded. As you already know, we maintain a 19-mile trail around Middlebury, which is used by more than 10,000 residents, families, and students annually. So we're talking about infrastructure here. I could easily talk about our education programs, and I could talk about the 3,500 acres of land we've conserved, but I think it's really, in this tight budget environment, talk about the infrastructure that we maintain as a nonprofit for the town of Middlebury, and these are costs that we bear alone in many cases. So in addition to the routine maintenance on the TAM, we have invested substantial staff time responding to climate-related impacts on town accessible trails, particularly following the 2023 flooding. And this summer, we completed an additional $50,000 in major infrastructure repairs in Middlebury, including the Belden Bridge, Zigzag Bridge, pipe bridges, all along trails along the TAM. And these trails are designed to serve the community and should last the community for decades. So these are costs that are incurred by our organization. We also continue to maintain the Boathouse Bridge, which connects the town and Middlebury College over Otter Creek and sees heavy use from Middlebury College students and town residents. And that's something that we maintain and we bear the cost for. In addition to these projects, we also absorb the cost of ongoing stewardship and routine trail maintenance on many town-owned properties, including Wright Park, Battelle Woods, and Chipman Hill. While Battelle Trust is the official managing entity for Battelle Woods and Chipman Hill, we perform the day-to-day trail maintenance on these heavily used community infrastructure. At present, we do not receive any annual stewardship funding from either the town or Battelle Trust to support this work, despite the fact that Battelle Trust and the town have a cell tower partnership at Chipman Hill, and this partnership has generated over $800,000 in reserve, so we receive nothing of that. We're requesting an increased town funding to reflect these realities, expanded public use, increasing climate-related maintenance demands, and the ongoing stewardship of popular town trails that currently rely on Malt's general operating budget, which comes mostly from donations, about $170,000 in donations per year. So much of this is essential infrastructure for access to recreation, and this behind-the-scenes work that we do protects Middlebury's green lungs and keeps the trail network, the TAM, safe, accessible, and resilient. And we view this request not as a one-time increase, but as an investment in infrastructure, public health, climate resilience, and quality of life. At $20,000, the town support would remain a modest contribution relative to the scope of services that we provide to both access to recreation, conservation, and education. And we believe it represents a strong value for Middlebury now and well into the future. And we just passed our budget last week, and we have about $170,000 allocated in expenses for the trails this year. That includes expenses, materials costs, but also our staff time. And for that amount of money that we're investing just in the trail side, and costs that we bear on our own, we feel that $20,000 is quite a benefit to the town to use those funds towards the infrastructure that we maintain. Thank you.
Can I ask you a question? Okay. So why is the contribution from other towns so low?
Sorry, come again?
the contribution from the other towns is very low when I see compared to what Middlebury is paying you.
So we asked this year Cornwall for increase to $2,500. Weybridge, we've asked for $2,000. They're smaller towns. The core of our work is here in Middlebury. The vast majority of the trail around Middlebury goes in and around Middlebury. The education programs, the majority of those programs are in Middlebury. And we estimate, as I said earlier, about 10,000 people use the TAM on a regular basis, and we estimate that portion is heavily skewed towards Middlebury, the town.
But it's used by everybody, right? Not just Middlebury residents, but everybody uses it.
Correct. It's used by Middlebury college students, tourists that come to Middlebury, and town residents.
How much does Middlebury College give you?
We, I would say we don't have any direct annual funding from Middlebury College. We have various projects with them in terms of conservation easements and other work. If I had to estimate, along the lines of $3,000 or $4,000 a year, but that could go up with this new project we have taking place in Cornwall, not Middlebury.
They're students. It does benefit the college.
Right.
And paying the cost of the maintenance is the challenge we have to paying the bills.
Yeah. And I'd say as another, I mean, I mentioned the $8,000 reserve, which has been generated by the cell tower partnership between Battelle Trust and the town. And I know we were here earlier this year talking about potential opportunities to extend some trails in Middlebury. I still would like down the line to also look at opportunities to leverage that funding as well. We've been around since 1987, and I think originally we were the Middlebury Land Trust, and we had a closer link to the town in terms of the way this fund was put together and some of the ideas behind that. And I think it's kind of gotten to where we are bearing a lot of the burden of the operating costs for the town. And we're happy to do that. I think it's important, the connection to the community, but I think $20,000 compared to the amount we put in annually, we do have a $95,000 funding gap on the trails. If we had extra money, we could build infrastructure or maintain the infrastructure on the Jackson Trail. We have work to be done on the Otter View Boardwalk and other things that we can't that are major expensive, that we kind of kick the can down the road because we don't have the money to do all that, even with all the donations we do bring in.
Money from the Battelle Trust comes with the approval of probate court, which I sent the board some information about that. In the early years, when we created the fund before the land trust was created. Okay. There was an appropriation of the interest earned on that, and this would be beyond what the probate court regulates. And it amounted to about $5,000 a year. That was a transfer from that conservation fund to the land trust. And maybe that could be looked at again.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks.
Kurt?
I'm Kurt Broderson, the Executive Director of Middlebury Community Television, and I know all of you. Thank you for having me. Farhad is on our board. Megan used to be on our board. Heidi, in her closing, referenced hoping everyone watches this, and that audience is courtesy of Middlebury Community Television. We have seen a $25,000 decline in cable revenue since our peak in 2022 as people cut cable subscriptions, while at the same time our online viewership has grown substantially. I will thank Drew, who's always kind of behind the scenes there, in particular for adding closed captioning, which pretty much came on since I spoke to you last year. opening more access for more viewers, and this is predominantly how people, no insult meant to the independent, but this is how people can see the whole story of what's going on in our local government, and I think that's really important. We have a small increase, I think, to $8,000, which is what we're requesting this year. I was given encouragement last year to increase what we were asking because I had kept it low, thinking of all of the economic choices everyone's making and what the town can support. But like I said, we've shown significant decline in revenue at the same time where I think people are using our services more and more and keeping them engaged in sort of local democracy, which I think is very important. That's all I had. If there are questions anyone would like to ask.
Thank you, Kurt.
Thanks.
Oh, Kurt, one question. With the upgrades to the library, are there upgrades, I'm assuming upgrades to your space, but what about the equipment that you use, things like that?
Right, so there will be substantial upgrades. I guess I can invite you to the open house and our annual meeting next September when we're back in the library. We'll have a new broadcast server. Our channels will be moving to HD, which seems like in 2025 the absolute minimum that should be allowed on TV. Because as I said, most of our viewers are online. Hopefully that will draw people to watching on TV as well again. But we'll be on the second floor, much more sort of visible presence in the library. So stop in and visit.
So the town both funds you, and then there's an impact fee that is required that comes through the library. What is that?
It's a little strange. The impact fee is sort of in lieu of utilities. And the town's funding of MCTV is relatively small. When we're moving back in the library, that's something Dana and I will be talking about. The impact fee is sort of a
$900, but it just seemed weird for us to pay you.
Yes, it's a little archaic, but that was how it was before my time.
Thank you, Kurt.
Andy has his hand up.
Hey, Kurt. I was curious, I don't expect that the cable cutting is going to come to an end. How are you planning to look for sustainable revenue as that carve out for PEG stations continues to decline?
Right. The big solution to that is modernizing telecommunications tax structure, which we're working with the legislature. There was no appetite for what was perceived as increased taxes. It would really be, in my perspective, it's more shifting. There was talk of taxing streamers like Netflix, which contribute nothing. It's just an outflow of money from Vermont and capturing some of that revenue.
Yeah, thanks.
Yep.
Yeah, we're going to promote this account. This is according to this message. This is
you can
related
also
to her, so
rename her.
We can rename it as well. That's the name that came from their account. So we will have them move over. All right, Linda, I believe this is you. You just have to unmute and turn your video. There we go.
Hi, Linda.
Yes. Sorry, I am on my husband's computer and I couldn't figure out how to change my name. So, hi, I'm Linda January, the executive director of the Otter Creek Child Center. Otter Creek is a child care center, early care and learning facility in Middlebury. And since the Jubilee 2013-14 fiscal year, we have been receiving $7,000. And we're asking for a $3,000 increase, taking that amount to $10,000. As many of you know, we have recently expanded. Our 150 Waybridge location went from 4 classrooms to 13 classrooms. We are in that building finally. We started operating December 1st with 8 classrooms. Which is currently 81 children and 69 families. and 40 staff. We plan to, in the new year, we plan to open 3 new classrooms, which will be 21 spaces, and about 10 new staff. 33 of the children we currently serve are Middlebury residents. 56 of the parents we serve work in Middlebury. We currently employ 40 people, and when we're at our full capacity of 139 children, would be adding around 20 new employees. In the fall of 2026, we could add 2 new preschool classrooms, where there are 2 new spaces. 61% of our families, 61% of the children enrolled receive child care financial assistance through the state of Vermont. 36 of our children receive universal pre-K dollars from one of five districts that we partner with. I always forget that Lincoln is their own district now. And we also have a partnership with Early Head Start through Champaign Valley Head Start, and 8 of our children receive those services through Early Head Start. And our ask for requests is to support our ongoing operation so that we can continue where we were able to raise the base of our salary for teachers to $20 an hour this current fiscal year. And we want to continue to increase wages, include benefits, and make our a really sustainable place for early childhood educators and a viable place for families. We've been here since 1984 and hope to be here for another 40 plus years. Yeah, so that's what I have.
Thank you, Linda. Any questions?
How do you like your new digs?
They're amazing. It is an amazing building. I know some of you came to our ribbon cutting, which was amazing, and I'm happy to give anybody a tour who would, at any time, if the select board would like that. It is an amazing facility. To have a state-of-the-art facility that is specifically designed for young children is pretty amazing. And we're still learning the quirks of how do these lights work and how does our high-tech heating system. We have a lot of new high-tech systems that we never had in our old farmhouse. So a little bit of growing pains, but in all the right places.
Great, thank you.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
Questions?
Did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment in general in response to the request we heard. Is that okay, Brian?
Actually, I would like to
That
get
it
it.
might
It's
help.
already
It
quarter to
might-
9.
It might help though, for looking at the budget.
Okay. Can you make it quick?
Okay, it's really quick. So I'm looking at social services, and I know we heard this earlier about, cut them all, because we can't bear that tax burden or reduce them all. And it's such a tiny part of the budget that I don't recommend that, but you might look within to see if it does make sense to reallocate, rather than just deny the request that you heard tonight. Like, that, it's possible.
You say take it from one agency and give it to another?
That's what I'm saying.
What's your recommendation specifically?
I'm thinking of Addison County Readers and RSVP. That would give you the 4,000 that have just been requested tonight in that section, for example. Now, malt is in a different category, so I'm not really sure how to address that one, but I just wanted to say that might
Don't you expect that they will petition if we cut them out, and we will still spend that tax money?
just, things get added, but they never come off, and I know that that's a hard discussion. It could happen on the floor of town meeting, where a recommendation is made, so I'm planting the seed.
Thank you.
So, Mark, did you want to walk us through the changes since the last meeting?
Yeah, we have an updated presentation to share. It's a brief one, so I realize it's getting late.
This is the current one, right?
You have, yes, you have paper copies of the current budget in front of you. You can just click on the next slide.
I can go flip it to a PDF if you want. It's a PowerPoint right now. So
Yeah, any
flip it.
suggestions?
I think we just have to sign in with our Outlook.
Yeah.
That's all.
If you want to know our viewership, it's up 22%.
Hey, that's good.
It's up 22%.
What's up 22%?
Our viewership online, 22% this year.
Nice.
This year?
Yeah, this
Okay.
year, and 30% of people watch with closed captions. And Andy, you'll love this. I'm deploying a Whisper server in the server closet to run better closed captions. A local Whisper instance.
So you can do like play-by-play. Fred's moving out onto thin ice now.
I mean, yeah, well, I can upgrade that. I'd love, yeah. I'll put a broadcast headset on and I'll do play-by-play.
There's a good one that captured permanent on the bottom front.
There's the headline. Okay. Let me get started. I'll share the screen. Andy will share the screen here so you can see as we're going through it, and for everybody else too.
Okay, thank you all for your patience. So this is just a brief agenda of the topics I'd like to cover with you in this updated presentation this evening. I'm going to start with a recap of the December 9th budget. We'll look at some revised assumptions for use of our local option taxes and some notable project cost increases. We'll review an updated major drivers list, a grand list adjustment, the reductions you requested from staff at our last meeting. So all of the reductions between that $300,000 and $500,000 range that you had requested for capital and general fund adjustments. And then we will take a look at where we stand now. So I won't spend a lot of time here. I just wanted to quickly recap where we were a week ago at this table. Our year-over-year budget was up 13.59%, or $1,976,751.66. Our total municipal tax rate at that time was estimated at 1.0783, or an increase of 0.1484 over fiscal 26. And the percentage increase in the tax rate was 15.96%. The estimated amount to be raised at that time was $10,976,253, and the fiscal 27 grand list estimate was $10,386,997,000. So again, those are outdated numbers at this point, but that's where we left off at our last meeting. So we've made a number of changes over the last week, but it's I thought it would be important to start here with some of these assumptions and some background information. So in February of 2024, this board voted to prioritize the library expansion project, and you all committed to allocate additional local option taxes for debt service payments at that time. And there were a few notable changes that have increased the cost a bit, the overall cost. Our interest rate increased from 3.66% to 4.336%. And we were unable to secure roughly $1.8 million in previously anticipated grant funding. We also opted for a 20-year bond in place of a 30-year bond, which I wasn't here for the conversation, but I can only assume that was to reduce the total interest expense over the life of the loan. So to honor the board's commitment, we assigned $350,000 in local option tax revenue directly to the project's debt service payments in this new revised version. And we're expecting the project to add about 5 cents to the tax rate in the coming year. Here's an updated look at our major drivers in your packet this evening. You'll find an updated major driver sheet. This here is just a summary. The handout that you have, the paper handout, and the sheet we posted online provides much more detailed information. The grand list adjustment. Our December 9th budget draft overestimated our grand list. We've corrected that error in this new draft, and we thought it was important to point that out. So, next up is capital reductions. And this, again, is just a summary of the adjustments that we made in our capital budget since our last meeting. So there are a total of about $224,000 in cuts. And we'll just leave that there for a minute so you can take a moment to absorb that information.
Mark, if you go back to the prior slide, can you tell me how much of the reserve is being used with those local option transfers? How much of that is beyond expected revenue from local option tax?
I'm sorry, which slide?
The prior with the local option tax transfers on the right.
256, 264.
This one here.
The one that has the expenses and the revenue. Yeah.
So it's that third line, the 256K, that's the reduction in surplus?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Which is the same as it was last week.
Yeah, that was a level funded line from last year.
Okay.
Everybody good with this capital slide? Operations, again, another summary here. On the off side, we reduced $397,274. $149,000 of that $397 was already in your budget last time, so it was under that manager adjustment column. So these are that's an updated grand total of the manager line adjustments, and just about every major category was cut in some way, and I summarized them here in this slide, the totals. It did not get into the line by line.
Okay. So those cuts were already there last week.
$149,000 of the $397.
Right.
248 more.
And was there wasn't any of that in the capital budget? reductions?
Last time, no. $224,000.
And these numbers add up to, I guess they can't pay.
Slide. Okay, so this is our last slide. This is where we landed after all the adjustments we made this week. The total general and capital fund reductions as of today are $621,274. Our year-over-year general fund budget is up by 10.37%, or $1,509,004.66. Our tax rate estimate is now 1.0495, or an increase of 0.1196 over fiscal 26, and the percentage increase is 12.86%. The estimated amount to be raised in taxes is $10,377,749, and the grand list estimate, again, that adjusted number that I mentioned in a few slides back, is $10,096,202.
This has changed since I talked to you at 2:30.
Changes constantly.
This page is no good.
Well, I would like to commend you. For,
Yeah.
This is much more than I thought you would be able to do. And both you and the department heads and the work you must have put in last week to come up with this. I mean, believe me in my heart, I wish it was a single-digit tax increase instead of double, but this is amazing. Frankly, that's more than I expected you would be able to find.
This was very much a team effort. Everybody was involved in this process. My one regret is that I did not have enough time to reach out to every single department head this time, because we had a 1 week turnaround. We did have an opportunity in the first round of cuts to meet with department heads. We didn't have the luxury of doing that this time. But we have a department head meeting tomorrow morning, and we'll talk more about that, about these cuts then.
I regret that at the last meeting, the department heads were here and we got wrapped around the axle on local option and the library funding and didn't give them a chance to present. And I don't know whether we need to come back for that, but anyway, that's all I'm gonna say right now.
I need more time to trace out the library.
You haven't got it.
Pardon?
You haven't got it.
I haven't got it.
No, I mean, if the board, this is not about the library, this is about the overall budget.
All I said
So,
is I need time to trace it out.
but we gotta talk about the budget tonight, so.
Oh, the library's not on the budget?
It is.
Okay.
But we're not gonna,
Okay.
what do you want, another meeting?
No, I'll take another meeting, but I'm not gonna, that's the only thing I was gonna say. I'll take another meeting if we have to have another meeting in the budget. We did that last year, we had to have additional meetings. So, I mean, this is still a significant budget, even not talking about the library.
So the library, right now, we have a 12-cent increase, right?
Correct.
And 5 cents is the library,
Okay.
which is a little more than what we'd said, 4.5 cents or something, but there's an interest rate
Yeah, I got that part.
adjustment. And it's so, and 12 cents, and so that's 7 cents. And if you look at some of the major drivers, wage and benefits, we have offered jobs to people they couldn't move here, they couldn't afford to move here. And we've made some changes. We had there's been a lot of complaints about policing and traffic and everything. And so some of the investment here is to correct the services side. And so we have a choice. It's not about the library, it's about services. Really.
I got it.
And do we take it to the taxpayers and let them decide? Because where we would be cutting is staff. staff time. And we have the best quality staff we've had. You know, we're really pretty fortunate, but you know, we had a number of people that we made offers to that could not even find a house around here. They couldn't afford to move here, and so it's like the 1,000 paper cuts because it's accumulation. There was no one that made it huge, and then on top of that, we have a unionized workforce that has. We are compelled to do pay raises and benefits, and you know, that all adds up. And so I reviewed all this stuff this last week, looking, is there some big glowing area that we could look to cut? And it's just accumulation of so many small things, but they add up to a pretty significant overall jump in cost. And I mean, there's your 6 cents.
Yeah, yep, yeah.
I don't know.
So when you say if we were to cut, you mean if we continue to cut, it would be staff time, or the current cuts reflect a cut in staff time?
It would be, you'd have to probably, to make a significant cut, you have to cut staff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there are a lot of things in the works, because we have the staff to be able to do it, that we have that, we're at that point where we're propelled for growth. We've been talking about this housing for a long time. We have to build the grand list. For 10 years, I've been trying to push for that. I really wanted to do a TIF, because we knew we had to. I mean, Kathleen every year said, we're on the verge of going off the cliff. We can't afford everything. And we really have had to grow. That's the only way. And following the COVID increases, we have been scrapping stuff together to keep it so that we didn't have any one major increase. And you know, we've frankly been pretty lucky, because if you look at the cost of a lot of our equipment, you know, this is at 12. What was it? 12%.
Year over year?
12 cents. What is it? 14%.
You're looking at an increase in the tax rate or budget?
What's increasing the budget? But if you pulled out the library,
the overall is a 10.37, so it'd be about 5%, maybe 4%. Oh, that's without the operational. We had it calculated lower when you pull out any operational, so
yeah, no,
just a few percent.
Yeah, I don't think that's right. Because I got a 10% on wages. Is it the rest of it is that low of an increase?
We're talking about the increase in the budget minus any impact from the library.
Not any impact. The 500,000 or 450.
I mean, if we're at a 10% increase and 500 is about a third.
Are we at a 10% increase? I thought it was
in
like
the overall budget.
14%.
That's more. That was the last tax rate, but we're at 10.37% increase in the overall budget.
Overall budget. So take 450 out of there. It's 7.5%, something like that. 7%. And even that is amazing, given what's the cost of wastewater supplies gone up in the last.
Yeah, it's, you know, you're up over 10-20% on everything's gone up. Yep. And they feel the same thing down at DPW because I talked to them. I mean, it's just what everything's gone up.
You know, we asked, the price of salt's gone up significantly. I don't know how we can scab it together without cutting services. And I think it's at that point where we have to take it to the voters and be able to explain to them that so it's either services or projects. And we did for years in the old days, we just kept foregoing doing projects. You know, the complaints, we had a complaint tonight about the roads aren't, I mean, we've been putting a lot of money into roads and we still, you know, there's a lot of complaints about the roads. And if you cut what we're allocating to that, then the complaints will just go up.
So overall budget is one thing, but the library, the commitment we had for $4.5 million, is that what the taxpayers are on hook for the library part? That's what we talked about, right, in the January meeting?
Yeah, I don't know why we're gonna, I mean, the library is a done deal.
Yes.
Okay, and we're trying to present it the way that we agreed to present it to voters in the way we allocated funded previously.
Yeah.
And so you can't go back on the library now. The question is, do we cut more or do we, because the library is getting built.
Yep.
You know, the board voted for that and we went forward with it. The town voted for that, we went forward with it. We felt that that was the will of the voters. We had a pretty high turnout and saved the 1.8 million of grants we didn't get. Everything else is identical to what we had, you know, at the time. And we had to make a decision, and we, at the time that we, when was it? January?
25, we made this.
January 25, we had to make a final decision, okay? So that decision, the die is cast. And now we have a budget that we knew was going to be impacted by that, and it's impacted some by that, but it's also impacted by a number of other things. And the staff, in my mind, has gone at it, and I mean, the total cuts was almost 500,000, I believe, from the proposed budget.
Since the last time, yeah.
Since we looked at it a week ago. And I sat with Mark and went through it yesterday. And if you go line by line, you know, we could sit here tonight and go line by line, but you don't have any staff input or anything. But his feeling and the feeling of the staff is that to cut it more is we have to cut some major projects to make it, or we have to cut staff. So, and I don't know if we wanted to go there.
What I'd like to ask about one, just to understand.
Absolutely.
The capital budget reductions are significant, and I know the infrastructure committee would be very interested in this, but we have Emily here, and so just to understand, you pick one of these. You have the sidewalk program, you're cutting 10,000. Now, the budget that was submitted for capital budget showed originally 155,200 this year going into that. So you're cutting 10,000 from that. I need to ask this because one of the largest numbers you have in the reserve balance here on that sidewalk account is 462,000. Now I know to complete the South Street project, you're going to have a bunch of sidewalk work because you're probably more than 100. But what would happen if we said we're going to defer 1 year? Like we did this for the tree planting. We're not going to fund that this year. We're going to use some of the fund balance for the work this year. What would happen if we said we're going to not put in 155,000 this year? We use the 462,000 we have in reserve to do the things we need to do, and basically defer that. You've done this in other parts of the budget. You've deferred a vehicle purchase and so forth. And how is there any capacity in that?
In the sidewalk program line, there might actually be capacity due to a conversation that we had late last week. The South Street project, I think we're going to split up again, given the funding where we're at right now. So the next phase of the project has a leg going from Porterfields up to South Main Street on the main line, and it also has a cross-country leg. And this phase of the project is just sewer stormwater, essentially. We have a grant for $664,000 that we have to spend this year. The bidding, the construction the way it is right now, I don't think we are going to get many contractors bidding on that project, and the project is considerably more expensive than we previously thought, and we don't have funding for the whole project at this point. So
that was a bond for 1.5 million was the whole South Street project in 2023.
my goal wasn't to use the whole bond, that was to support SRF funding to supplement the project, so you get a lower interest rate.
And I got a question about the other bond.
Hang on, but still let me finish that piece of it. So part of that project was going to replace the sidewalk on South Street this year. And I talked to Jeremy the other day, and we're going to look into just doing the cross-country leg of it. And then coming back once we get funding again with SRF to do the main line, which then means we could delay the sidewalk component of it.
Does that delay the paving of the street? Does it live with the bumps for another?
It delays the whole thing.
I thought the sidewalks were separate. I was hoping it'd be something that wouldn't delay that.
I mean, there's no point in paving it if we're gonna dig it all back up to replace the storm and sewer.
Yeah. So another bond that was approved that same year on 1.5 was 2023 was the Bakery Lane project.
1.2.
That was going to kick in during FY27, and how much? I'm worried about adding the other baked-in added debt.
We didn't bond it. We got
didn't
bond
bond it yet.
approval.
We have
The goal
approval.
that
Yeah.
was bond approval to get SRF funding. It was the same thing,
Okay.
but we don't have the SRF funding right now.
And I'm like, for what other bonded things that are projects that we have to anticipate taking on that we haven't got on our sheet here yet?
None for, I mean, most of the bonded projects that we've been voting on recently are in the water and wastewater sector, so they're not in this.
Tell me about gravel road paving, paving Upper Plains Road. We've lived a lot of years with gravel.
That was a project that was in last year's paving contract, so that's already been awarded to a contractor.
Emily, what's the environment that you said we're not getting a lot of bidders?
The big companies that would be interested in a $3 million South Street project, which is what it likely is now, have big jobs right now, so they're not going to bid on it.
So they have multi-year jobs
We've been
already?
talking to them, yeah. So I think by splitting it off, we'll get more people interested in it. And we'll also be able to utilize that grant funding that goes away this year if we don't use it.
Okay. So it wasn't predicated upon finishing the project, it was just towards the project?
No, I think we can shift it around. I need to talk to our project manager from the ARPA funding course, but I think they'll allow that to work.
Okay.
Because he was willing to shift it to a pump station project or something. So, as long as for the CSO, for the separation.
Yeah.
So as long as we're still achieving that goal, I think they'll allocate it.
But coming back to the sidewalk, that's separate from the street out there.
But so any of these
Referring to
projects,
that?
Fred, like on the South Street project, sidewalk pays into it, highway pays into it. It's not just a straight water project or, so some of
Referring
the
to sidewalk,
money gets.
using the fund balance is not a good idea.
Well, we have a lot of other sidewalks. We have a sidewalk project going out to bid next spring. That is a significant amount of sidewalk.
Did we do any this year?
We did not.
So what if we deferred another year?
We've deferred 2 years already.
Okay.
And that's how this is sort of built up.
I see.
I wouldn't recommend it.
No, okay, I just,
I
who
mean,
knows
I
what-
feel like we're already deferring a lot as it is, the way this is presented, and I totally get the goal, but anytime you defer, it costs more when you do the project.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Nick,
Yes.
So I also don't want to relitigate all of the library, but you mentioned in our meeting last week that you were uncomfortable with the presentation of the funding for that debt, and that you were shouting from the rafters that we were counting on money that had kind of routinely been spent. And I didn't hear that shouting, and I was just curious about kind of how that didn't get to the select board.
Yeah.
That's a pretty hard-hitting question. I mean, I don't think it's my role to come straight to the select board ever. And there's always different ways of doing things that presentation-wise and in a meaningful sense, you know, you allocate to a project and you stand behind a project. You know, but when our budget is growing the way that it is, I feel that I attempted to communicate that there would not be a pot of money available to offset an immediate increase in the taxes the way that we're seeing, which has come to fruition.
Sure. No. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, I appreciate it. I felt like that was kind of a question that was sitting out there from the meeting last week. And I wanted to address it squarely while you were here.
I think it came up quite a bit during the wastewater conversation that we were having last winter when we were trying to figure out how to fund that at the same time we were having a library conversation.
So in the past years when we've had individual projects, you know, shall the town, after Article 2, we have shall the town appropriate so much from the land local option tax fund, Cross Street Bridge Fund for one of these to reduce the capital expenditure of that. And I forget which ones were last year, but Exchange Street comes to mind, and
Exchange Street and
PD reuse or something
that
like
was the 256 that's on
so we don't have any capacity to do that this year. Is that right, Nick?
Well, the we don't have capacity to do extra because it's going towards the library. That was what we
Okay.
that same 256 that went to those two projects is being allocated to the library.
Understood. So Warning won't have that this year.
One of the disappointments was we thought that the grand listed, I mean, they did this yeoman's work, and we didn't see as much of a reduction it's a big reduction in the budget. It's not as big of a reduction in the tax rate as it would have otherwise been. And that's because the grand list adjustment. In querying on that, when I was in here reviewing it with staff, I think that we're going to see a larger increase in FY28 because there's a significant number of the Stonecrop projects that are coming online that actually don't get impacted until FY28 tax season.
You know, I was thinking about that you know, the 44 million that you came back to 1.4 million of increase in grand list, and you know that Velco substation, that's in the tens of millions. So was the Purpose Energy project, and I just think, I don't know if those are somehow not taxable or just what, but I know the FW Web building, but 1.4, I'm hopeful that there's more there that's happened between last April 1st and this coming April 1st that can be added on that we're just missing or something.
Right, and frankly, we could be surprised, pleasantly, hopefully. but right now, we cannot count on it.
Allison's coming in tomorrow. Ask her about those two.
Well, Allison's on here right now, actually. She's our next item. So.
All right, well.
Yeah.
All right, great.
We can ask her.
She's been patiently waiting.
Emily, can you share the acronym SRF, State Revolving Fund, correct? Can you talk about like where we're at with those, maybe what the temperature is to add to that from the legislature or the funding source, and you know what we or when we expect to see another round that we could pull from?
So they come up, they just posted the priority list applications last week. They are due in February. And so I submit every year multiple projects. On the water side, they are begging us to take money. So one project that we have fully designed that we're trying to get some additional funding on to put forward is the Foot Street water line replacement, which would then help with paving on Foot Street. But the wastewater side, the clean water side, has a lot of projects, I think partially because so many wastewater plants got hit in the flooding 2 years ago. Everybody's coming up right now and so the SRF funding funds drinking water and wastewater, stormwater. So it's somewhat limited in what you're able to apply for. And you just get a reduced interest rate. It's a 2% administrative interest rate instead of a bonded interest rate of whatever the market is.
Something that we heard a lot over the past maybe year and a half was an interest in building redundancy in our water. And can you speak on, where that is in our budget and if that is something that we made a capital budget reduction to or increase to?
So that's in the water fund. That's not in this fund, but I submitted for water redundancy project to feed an additional line to Exchange Street, and that got funded for engineering. And so that I've been working on preliminary engineering on that project, and I've also been working on preliminary engineering for an additional well source. So, which is, going back to what the presenter earlier was saying about the needed growth in the area. Any growth, the real consideration is the allocation that we're going to need for an additional well. So that is in the near future as well, and depending on the location and how big it is and how close to existing infrastructure it is, those are all major drivers in the cost. It could be a $20 million project depending on location. So even though we're getting additional development, there is upfront cost with being able to provide it.
More concerning with it depending upon type of, whether it's manufacturing.
Yeah, the use for sure.
Yeah.
But
housing less so?
Housing much less so. Well, depending, like FW Webb isn't a huge user compared to Stonecrop, but if you compare Agrimark to Stonecrop.
Right. So, I'm just thinking about the taxpayer out there, besides this increase, and we have more information to support, the percentage increases, it's still a large percentage. And remember the news about the school taxes in the state? And then the water and sewer rates, we have a sewer facility, that's a big rate increase that's coming.
Yep.
And so it's still a tough environment to sell all of this.
I think part of the reason for the school increase though is because the state funded it with one-time money last year, 6%, so now we're seeing a full jump.
I know, but people are gonna experience the cumulative effect of all of this.
I completely understand.
And then we have reappraisal coming the year after that. Just as icing on the cookie.
Well, the reappraisal might reallocate based upon people's values, but it doesn't change the budget.
I know.
So the idea that it changes the tax rate is really...
But residential values have gone up significantly and shifted from the commercial sector. So I've never experienced a reappraisal that didn't.
Cost a little bit.
Looking forward to one.
Yeah, Jeremy?
Yeah, I would just like to make a comment as a taxpayer, as I said. I mean, I'll admit I was pleasantly surprised seeing the numbers tonight that I looked at the last meeting and looked at here. And I'm like every other taxpayer in this town, and Middlebury's one of the higher taxes in the county. It's a big lift when the taxes come in. But at the same point, I think, discussing the library, you could discuss it until the hills come home, but the library is being built, and this is the budget we have. And I really would encourage you not to cut services anymore. I mean, I really think there's a minimum level of service you're trying to maintain in the town of Middlebury, and making sure that we're not tripping over a dollar to save a dime, that we're not cutting so much this year that we're creating a problem years down the road that's gonna cost us money. I mean, I think that's something we've done in the past, and it hasn't served the community well. I've gone through this line by line. I wish there was more money in some of them, but you gotta get to a number you gotta get to. And I think they've done an amazing job cutting it. And I would really encourage you folks to take this to the voters at town meeting day and make the argument, make the strong argument about why we need to do this and why we need to spend this money. Nobody's gonna like it. But I think at the same point, I think the town, the taxpayers and the ratepayers of the town of Middlebury have shown you time and again that if you go and you show them why we need to do stuff, they are very receptive to those messages. I mean, they certainly showed it to us with the wastewater bond vote at the last town meeting, where we had an 88% yes, even though it's something that's very much going to be raising their rates over the course of 5 years. So I really think that, you know, I would strongly encourage you not to cut anymore. I really think that what they've done is they've done a fantastic job of cutting, and I really encourage you to take this, even though it's in the double digits, to the voters, and just make the strong argument about why we need to do this as a community.
I think he needs to make the presentation at the town meeting.
Yeah, we need another great video.
And he wore a hockey sweater in case a fight broke out tonight.
And Jeremy, I appreciate that, because that's kind of what I was trying to allude to, is we have cut previously, and we scrambled for 2 decades to try to catch back up.
Yeah.
And I feel like the cuts we've made are not going to substantially put us behind the 8 ball. They don't necessarily push us ahead, but I thank you very much. Mark, walk us through what our needs are on this. Do we need to actually approve it, or we just warn? Have we already warned for the?
So we'll have our public hearing. You signed off on that at the last meeting, so
we
that'll
already
be the first
signed
one in
off.
January.
Okay.
We'll put together, working with Emily and the bond council, and we'll have a draft of the town warning that we'll be bringing to you. So we're aiming for the second meeting, similar to our calendars in the past, in January. That's assuming there's no other workshop or something else that you wanted to have in between now and then.
And that's when we finalize 100%. So we could make some changes if we decided we looked into some of these agencies. We could do some shuffling at a later date. Okay.
You said bond council, is there a bond items coming on the agenda?
Yeah.
What new project are we bonding?
Sweat Street water line improvements.
It's going to be paid for through the water rates?
We have to have bond approval to receive SRF funding for the project.
Okay. Got any others?
That we were going to buy.
It's the only one I'm putting on there.
So those documents that typically come forward every year, we'd have to assemble those. So we'd be presenting those to you the first meeting, hopefully the first meeting in January. It's that large packet of documents
You're
we get
going
every
to
year.
present to us? Okay.
It's a surprise.
What? I just got the information Friday, yesterday. So.
This is one of those where if the voters show they support it, we have a better chance of getting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they, like the drinking water SRF funding doesn't have enough projects, so they have funding available.
Yeah.
So we have a really good chance.
You've built a hell of a track record here, so we're not questioning you. We just want to know before the voters ask us.
It's about 1.52 million.
So, and the well isn't going to be bonded?
The well source. We're not at that point yet. We will have to bond for it. We're just doing preliminary engineering, so I think I'll probably apply for engineering in this next phase, but that's gonna take a while longer, so.
So, do people think there's a need for an added meeting that Dan was suggesting, like in the?
Oh, I just said we've had them before.
I think we've got a couple in January, and if we have things we want to talk about, but unless somebody really feels that we should trim the budget more by looking at services or staff, or projects rather, that I personally am making the argument for that we've done everything we can and it's time to take it to the voters. We might make some small tweaks looking at some of these things.
I don't feel like we should trim anything more. I think Jeremy made a really great impassioned speech. However, I still feel uncomfortable with the misunderstanding, the error that led to the library funding confusion, and I think it's a significant.
It will be part of our presentation.
I think that we owe it to the taxpayers to acknowledge it. I think this is my first budget experience, so, I'm just trying to speak from the gut here, but I feel like it's,
I don't
for
think
me,
it's
it
the
was
taxpayers though. Yes and no. There was a huge misunderstanding in the way it was presented last week, as opposed to what we had approved and said we had boxed funding.
That's it.
That's the biggest issue. And so last week it was a big hoopla, and I really don't want to get into spending our entire budget season regurgitating
I don't either,
something we
but I
talked
do think
about.
as a taxpayer, when I voted for the library, and when a lot of people voted for the library, a project which is amazing and I support it and I would have voted for it no matter what, it was very clear that it wasn't, it was almost like, it was all about the bang for your buck, right? We were gonna get this incredible thing and not have to increase the tax burden very much at all.
No, we always said it was a 4.5 cent tax. That was always part of it. That was always
But didn't we
part of it.
build in, weren't we expecting to have that local option tax?
That's paying that's paying what we're just showing you it's paying, but there was always going to be a 4.5 cent or thereabouts. There was John might remember better, he writes about it, but I'd have to go back and look. But part of that vote was that the taxes was gonna pay for 4.5 million bonded. And that was going to.
So maybe somebody needs to sit down with Megan and explain how it's allocated in the budget to address the library.
Yeah, happy to do that. And
I would
I'll
like
pull
to
out.
be a part of that as well. I feel like there's
Yeah.
many of us who might feel confused about
Yeah.
this.
Now,
and
you have a spreadsheet that you were looking at that the others of us don't have.
Well, it was those that were on the board when we took it to.
Okay, so maybe understanding that with that, to see where the money's flowing from would be something that could help the new members.
And we all did, actually you weren't on the board yet, I don't think, so, but the rest of the board, everybody was there in January when we made a decision on the 1.8. So, I'm happy to, I think we can do that in January. We can walk through it, make sure we understand it, because I think the board should be very clear.
Yeah.
But the taxpayers did vote knowing that a portion of that was going to be paid with increased taxes. We had a shortfall, and we said the shortfall we feel we can handle with local option tax.
But what about the double dipping? Weren't we talking about double dipping last
No, that was
no, and that was a very unfortunate thing. I think if there was a spreadsheet, and maybe this is what you have, that would show the project cost and whatever additions there need to be because of the roof and other things, the money that's
what we want to get working off from is this budget sheet, okay?
No, but
there was a lot of sheets, and I still have that old spreadsheet I can show you, but there was always an understanding that we were allocating a portion of the local option tax, and that 256,000 of extra that we have year after year, it's been a certain amount, 100,000 one year, whatever, but the extra amount that we would pull out of reserve funds would go towards paying the shortfall until that was paid off.
But I was talking about the spreadsheet showing that we're gonna obligate those future local option revenues. And yes, it should all come together on this, but for people who wonder or just don't understand the intersection of that local option money with the taxes raised.
Trying to explain that though.
I think one thing is late at night. This is what that's why I opened this with, and I've been quiet. But there's obviously confusion. Maybe in our next meeting when we have clearer heads and have time to digest this, because we're not all of us are going to stand up before the town and speak. But there's going to be lots of questions, and we all need to be able to address this in a logical manner that everybody understands. So that's what I was getting at.
And you know, we should definitely go through it. In this budget is exactly what we agreed with the voters on. It is in there, and there was other than, you know, maybe 0.5 cent more because there's a higher interest rate. But there was always a chunk that the voters voted knowing that it was going to apply to the tax rate. Because we told them it's going to be this much for every $100,000 on your tax bill.
So when everybody brought up the library today, that was the intent, was to understand that part, and you cleared that up.
Well, maybe probably not yet.
Not yet.
We'll talk about it in January. I'll find the presentation.
We were double dipping from.
There is a very different way of talking about it in my head, or understanding it in my head, versus how it was understood in the past. Just when we talk about it and the numbers, just even getting to the same point where we're talking the same language is huge. And so when we go around that circle 3, 4, 5 times, it can very easily come across to me like people are double counting the local option tax money, but they're looking at it differently. They're looking at it over the future 30 years and saying, money that we allocated to basically hold in this one line to accrue in another. I mean, we can tie ourselves in knots over this.
So you're saying we're not double dipping?
We're not double dipping.
Well, that was positive.
Question.
I feel.
You're on TV. Come on.
We are not the.
So I don't want to bring up. I'm going to bring up another touchy subject that would be help clarity. I think for all of us that we've talked a little about. You've asked for this, and we've all talked a lot about it. It would be nice in January if we could talk about the local option tax, the future of it, and the local option tax reserve, and how we're impacting it with current budgets, what our prognosis is for the future, and so we can understand where this is going instead of us. Because last year we got this little debate here about needed, and I think we threw $100,000, pulled another $100,000 out of the local option tax surplus and help solve some of this problem. But we know that's vulnerable. There's $2.3 million in it, and it would be great for us to be able to understand it. Trying to live within this paper, trying to live within here, but that does exist outside. So I think it would be important for us all to know that.
I think we're going to run into this every year where we're trying to move this spreadsheet in a simpler way so that we don't end up speaking 2 languages.
Yes.
And so we have to present that this year very clearly and show how we got here in that old language, and then kill that old language.
It's fine. It's fine. We just need to know what we just need to know, because it's very confusing.
Maybe Jeremy can do the presentation.
Yeah, but if you can explain that to us.
I will admit I sat down with a calculator for about 2 hours to figure out how to match myself last Saturday morning.
So I don't think that those are 2 great topics for the January meeting. Okay, I mean the normal select board meeting.
The normal select.
We don't need any action today.
No, we don't.
Action.
We don't
Okay.
approve this.
All right, let's move.
It's still living.
It's alive.
It could be miracles, or there could be some projects you get angry at and want to cut. Oh, boy, yeah.
So we're meeting in January on the 13th and the 27th. Public hearing on the 13th, and then on the 27th, we finalize it.
Finalize it, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we have to approve the listers grand list. There's no measure.
Do. And Allison has so graciously hung on.
Yay,
as we have
Allison.
She can feel our
gone
pain.
slightly past the time I told her we'd get to it.
By 2 hours?
So, Allison, I'm going to allow you to speak there, and she might also be this Ripton one. We'll find out.
Could be sleeping now.
Unless somebody else from Ripton has joined. And the certificate is in the packet. There you go. There she is.
Good. Wasn't sure what my name was going to be.
You're on representing the whole town of Ripton. Yeah.
Yeah. So sorry there are errors and omissions. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer. A couple were just mistakes in a click in a drop-down menu during property transfers. Fred brought up utilities.
Vermont Transco is Velco, isn't it?
Yeah, that came from the state. The state is providing those utility values now. And Beth and I still thought they were low. So hopefully for next year there'll be more. I do think the grand list will go a little higher than what's showing, given what I've got entered so far in the estimate for stone crop. So I think it'll go up a little from tonight's figure.
And is the Purpose Energy one, is that taxable?
It is. That was interesting because the state is not providing a value for that. So before the grand list was completed, they told me to try to put a value on it, which we did. And it was appealed, well, just a grievance, and we reduced it a bit.
The owner told me in the grand opening it was in the tens of millions.
We had put it in at about 8 million, dropped it to 6 after discussions with Purpose. The Department of Property Valuation and Review is still not going to provide a value for that utility, so I reached out to a utility appraiser and have a proposal from them for a flat fee of $40,000. They'll value the facility for us. I mean, that's pretty much the whole assessor's office line for a year. So I thought I would talk with Mark and David about that proposal and if it's worth it. It's not, the value is probably low. Most of the value, if it goes up, does go to the education tax. So I just want to figure out with others if we pursue using this specialty appraiser, when the payback would be.
Yeah.
It's kind of like.
Well, thank you.
Oh yeah.
Daunting.
See what he's asking for.
Yes.
Are there any questions? If there are none, I'd seek a motion.
I'll move to approve the 2025 grand list errors and omissions reports as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded. One more opportunity for questions. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? I see your thumb up, Andy. Thank you, Allison.
Thanks, Allison.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Select board member concerns, Fred.
Again, thank you to Mark and the department heads for the work and to talk too much to me. Thank you.
Also, thank you everybody, and also I am confused. So I'd love to have a chance to see all those numbers and see that spreadsheet and understand exactly what is, yeah, I'd like to understand better.
Absolutely. You'll feel more comfortable doing this about 4 years from now,
Well, hopefully 4 years from now, we won't have.
and we
this
won't have
same
libraries
scenario.
and stuff like that.
This is kind of a
Funds and-
one of a kind scenario.
This is
First year it's hitting and Isabel?
Thank you to all the staff who worked diligently on this. It's tough, but I think being able to move through it together and also come up with common language, I think is going to be really helpful to be able to, you know, let the voters know our why behind it.
I'm good. I have more concerns in life than you want to hear. I can start spewing them out, but I'm not. Good.
Are we going to discuss the funding request for the social services, or have we decided?
That's what I was talking about. We have time to, I think people ought to take those presentations, look at if there's others that they would like to consider. I mean, after Laura's comments, I think that's an option. I think you have multiple options. But that's probably an option we hadn't thought about, and to put anybody on. I mean, if you're going to consider cuts, we will. Yes.
I have a quick question on that. Typically, any budget adjustments are always done by the staff, and we've never made it an adjustment in any of these ever in my time.
No, we have denied.
Is this our time to do that? Is this something we want to do?
Well, we've denied, but we could.
We have denied requests.
We've denied.
Yeah, we have denied, and we have given more money to people when they ask.
I don't remember that, but
Yeah, we had discussed this one.
nobody ever gives more money than they're asking.
Maybe that's the time you were not on the meeting like usually.
Oh yeah, the one meeting a year that I missed. I missed that one.
And he was hiking. No, you were canoeing then.
No, but I still
are
zoom
fighting.
in canoeing.
Yeah, I appreciate that we managed to get Kevin in here despite the budget season. I really love his vision.
It was a great presentation, by the way.
And his skill in communicating it. And thanks, of course, to the staff for the incredible pencil sharpening and response to the budget numbers we posted last week. It's a lot of work, and it's much appreciated.
All right, you gonna be back for the next one?
Yeah, I'll be back for the next one.
Where are you now? Dedham or what?
I think he's in
I'm in Dedham, man.
I think
That's where
Dedham.
I work sometimes. I've got an office down here.
I think he's in Dedham. Or was that a typo? So, thanks everybody for the staff for the hard work. Thank everybody for, putting in 2 late nights trying to work on this budget. I know it's still a disappointment to all of us, but it's also some of the facts probably. So, if anybody has questions, I'm going to try to put some stuff together that I can bring and walk everybody through. I'll get with Mark, but I have the presentations and stuff, so.
Or you can just go to Brian's office for
Sit down for a coffee, but you have to bring a coffee. So,
It'd be helpful for all of us, frankly.
I think so that we all need to understand the same way, and that's what the challenges we have when, like Nick wasn't a part of the discussion at the board level as to how we were blocking funds and stuff, and so it's not that, it's just the discussion is how you're looking at it, and so Mark is struggling. Is like, we need to have a common picture. So the common picture is the budget worksheet, and we just have to get it so that we're all working off from one worksheet. So
it's not that these other details of how the project financing works or how local architect works that feeds into this. It supports this. I think that's the missing piece.
Yeah, that is yes.
You need a motion to
I need a motion to adjourn, please.
I move.
Second. Oh, Megan can have it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good night.